1917, the British found what was called a Zimmerman note. Zimmerman was he was the Mexican ambassador, and he was the German ambassador. He wrote a letter to Mexico trying to get Mexico to join Germany, because then they knew that they could try to go against America, and they promised Mexico if they would join that they would get land from America if they won. So of course that became known as the British intercepted that. It became known to the Americans. That was put in the newspaper in March of 1917, and you need to know this date. So you need to know pretty much this whole page here. Know that the Lusitania, the sinking of Lusitania, and the Zimmerman note pretty much kind of like sealed the deal for America to enter the war. On April 6, 1917, America officially enters World War I, and you need to know that date. So if you look at the beginning and end, we pretty much entered at the last year of the war. And there you can see the sinking of the Lusitania. It's also, there's a picture in your book about that. Okay, I'm going to try and move a little faster. There's a lot to say. So America was in World War I. What helped us get in there? We know we had the Selective Service Act. You need to know what that is. That was pretty much the draft act. And that first started with 21 to 30-year-old men. They had to register with the local draft board, and soon it became 18 to 45. And of course, we know that they selected them randomly, and people would have to then join the war. The other two things were important, but they won't be on this quiz, so I'm going to pass over them right now. We know with the Western Front, this is really important to remember. There was trench warfare. We talked about this last year for those that were in my class, the poisonous gas. They had those gas masks. We talked about machine guns, all of these things. That's good to know. You don't necessarily have to know that for the quiz. We did talk about the flying ace. We had the Red Baron was the German guy, and Eddie Rickenbacker was the American who actually was very famous with that. And remember that the airplanes, this was the first war that airplanes were used, and they soon became a very vital part of the war. Okay, so some things to know for sure on this one though. Make sure you know that General John Pershing led the American forces in Paris. So by the time Americans joined, Germans attacked Paris with the Big Bertha, which is their great big long range guns. And you do need to know what a Big Bertha was. Here's a picture of it. They were 75 miles away from Paris, and they were able to attack Paris with that. They got as close as 40 miles away before the Americans came with General John Pershing and other people, and they were able to push them back. And eventually, Germany has to pretty much sign a ceasefire with them. So that was pretty much very quickly what happened in World War I. With the Americans entering, it changed the whole course of this war. So let's just go through this page. You do need to know that Woodrow Wilson, President Wilson, had the 14 points. That was mostly for world peace, and that his last point was for a League of Nations that would promote that, which is very ironic also because, as one of your points says here, I'll put them all up here, the United States never joined the League of Nations. So we never joined the League of Nations, although that was Woodrow Wilson's idea. So Armistice Day, which was the end of World War I, is on the 11th hour of the 11th day of the 11th month, 1918. And that's when Germany finally signed the papers to surrender. And of course, November 11th is now Veterans Day. Some of you remember there was actually battles going on before they actually signed that. It was right up to the last minute. Some people, they were still fighting. And then when they sounded the trumpet or whatever, it was over. They walked off the battlefield, and there's actually pictures of that things. Okay. The big four you won't need to know who they were, but just for reference, Wilson, of course, was from America, George from England, Communism was from France, and Orlando was from Italy. They met at the Conference of Versailles, and because of that, we have the three main points to the Treaty of Versailles. Just know that Germany was the main country that received kind of like the punishment for the war, and it pretty much did lots of damage to Germany, which caused Germany to lead into the rise of World War II, which we'll talk about later. Okay, and one more slide I want to do really quickly. I'll do it as quick as I can. I wish I could spend more time. Of course, I would be if we were in class, but doing this over line. So we're talking about communism. So during World War I, Russia started out to be with the Allied powers. So it was with France and Great Britain, and it was on the Eastern Front. We talked about the Western Front was in Europe. The Eastern Front was in Russia. Russia was doing pretty well, but what happened right in the middle of the war in 1917, right before the United States joined, we have the Bolshevik Revolution of 1917. You need to know this. That was the communist revolt in Russia that was led by Vladimir Lenin. And so this is very important. You know that they overthrew the government and then they changed sides of the war. So once communism came in, instead of being with the Allied powers, they made a peace treaty right here, the Brest-Litovsk treaty with Germany, and they became now Central Powers. So that was a huge blow to the Allies because the Allies lost the Eastern Front. Germany gained that. Then we had what's called the Third International. This was a terrorist organization in Moscow that was dedicated to the worldwide revolution. And of course, they really wanted to take down America. And so we have what happened, this Red Square, you need to know, Red Scare was the threat of communists in America. And this happened even after the war. Russia sent in some communist sympathizers and they organized in America. They created labor strikes. They created other things that became very violent. And so this man, who was the head of the FBI, John Edgar Hoover, that's him. This is Lenin, by the way. But Hoover was the one that put down the threat of communism, tried to find out who was on the Communist Party and put them down. And so that was a big scare in America during this time. Okay, I'm going to stop there. I'm sorry I had to go so fast. If you need to, you can watch this over and over and over. And I hope I didn't say things too hard for you to understand. But I wanted you to know what you needed to study. I'll tell you the rest of the notes next time. Thank you.